Reports indicate that 1 in 3 women have experienced physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. Violence, we know, is not inevitable, but it can be prevented. The United Nations has designated November 25 as the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women. The premise of the day is to raise awareness of the fact that women around the world are subject to rape, domestic violence, and other forms of violence. In Nigeria, it is no longer news that violence against women, the girl child, are common occurrence, despite efforts made by several groups and governments to curb the menace. In some few weeks from now, people across the world will gather to organize activities to canvass for a world free of violence. So we decided on your program policy on track today to look at some efforts made to achieving concrete solutions to this scourge. And of course, the role of business community in ensuring that women are protected in the workplace. Still on our bouquet for today is a report on Swaziland. Swaziland is a country where the monarch continues to trample on human and trade union rights. Despite this tyrannical rule, the Trade Union Congress of Swaziland, TOCASWA, continues to operate, fighting to see that respect for human and trade union rights are restored. My name is Mo Wilkie, your host, and you are welcome. As our tradition, here are stories making rounds in the world of work in the last 1 week. The European Union and Canada signed a free trade agreement on Sunday with the aim of generating more jobs and growth. This move is a step that will enable a provisional implementation of the pact in early 2017 with the removal of most import duties. The Canada agreement is seen as a springboard to a larger EU deal with the US, known as the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Treaty, TTIP, which has been the target of labor unions and environmental and other protest groups. A further 10,000 civil servants have been dismissed and 15 more media outlets closed in Turkey over suspected links with terrorist organization and US-based cleric Fethullah Gulen for orchestrating a failed coup in July. Academics, teachers, health workers, prison guards, and forensic experts are among the latest to be removed from their posts through 2 executive decrees published on the official Gazette on Saturday. Opposition parties have described the continued crackdown as against the rule of law and democracy. The government, on the other hand, says the actions are justified given the threat to the state posed by the coup attempt that claimed lives of more than 240 people. Reports show that more than 100,000 people have been sacked or suspended and 37,000 arrested since the abortive coup in Turkey. The Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, TUC, has condemned what it termed the plot by some members of the Senate to amend the Code of Conduct Bureau and Tribunal Act to their own advantage. It says that the act that regulates the activities of CCB is not meant for a specific individual and will outlive the 8th Assembly. At the time, the wages and allowances of workers can barely take them home. The legislators continue to pay themselves high salaries and allowances with the taxpayers' money for doing nothing. Labour says it would mobilize to checkmate any organ of government that misappropriate their positions or the nation's commonwealth. The atrocity crimes being committed against women and girls, along with domestic abuse, harassment at work, sexual slavery, and trafficking are grave threats to progress. What about female genital mutilation or cutting? Early marriage. These are practices that traumatize individuals and tear the fabric of society. As the world strives to counter and prevent violence extremism, the protection and empowerment of women and girls remain key.
From 25th November through 10th December, Human Rights Day, the 16 days activism against gender-based violence aimed to raise public awareness and mobilize people everywhere to bring about change were observed. Violence against women as a human rights violation. It is a consequence of discrimination against women in law and also in practice. Reports show that 35% of women and girls globally experience some form of physical and/or sexual violence in their lifetime, with up to 7 in 10 women facing this abuse in some countries. Close to 20 years ago, 189 governments came together in Beijing, China. They adopted a platform for action that spelled out key strategies to end violence against women, empower women, and achieve gender equality.
Almost 20 years ago at the Beijing conference, certain actions were spelled out to address this issue. Amongst them are the empowering women and gender equality. How would you assess it?
Unfortunately, they did not get the percentage that they required because of all these step-by-step issues, because of the cultural biases here. It's been a long haul, you understand, to get people to understand that we're not trying to say that women should go haywire and begin to look for trouble or be confrontational, because the gender equality explanation, men seem to not understand it, that it's not that it's to put women against the men, but it's that you should give them the right podium for them to express themselves, the right podium for them to be at par where wages are concerned. So the Beijing Millennium Development Goals for 2015 was not really effective, but we have taken a great leap from that point to now. And we are now going on to the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals, of which number 5 is gender equality and empowerment.
When we talk about domestic violence, what do we mean and how rampant is it in Nigeria?
When we talk about domestic violence, it's various aspects: psychological, sexual, financial, and physical, where two people who live together or have a relationship, one party now takes control and becomes physical or uses other means of control to dominate the other party. And it's quite rampant. It's quite rampant in Nigeria because we run a culture, a patriarchal culture that, puts the man over the woman, and the women take a lesser role in the society, whether it be corporate, whether it be community, even at home. The marriage is not a partnership. It becomes like a man said, that I own the woman. And we're trying to say, yes, it's a marriage, but the marriage does not mean that you now take it into your control to dehumanize the woman, to break her, to cause her so much pain at home. And in some cases, women have died in very strange circumstances.
We have an act in the country. How effective is it? Or is it just on paper?
No, it's not very effective because it's not being pushed forward. Awareness is still very low. And even the women themselves, and mind you, a few men too get abused. Even the women themselves, they have to come out of the code of silence. There's a lot of code of silence, shame, the fear of stigmatization, rejection. So they keep quiet and they suffer in silence. But it is when it now becomes life-threatening that they come out. Sometimes, they've come to report, and when you are about to take action, they back out. Maybe the man has begged her, or the family has come in, or the church has come in, but then it happens again, because a person who uses conflict, violence to resolve a conflict has an issue, has anger management issues, has emotional issues, because that's the only way they can react to anything that's negative about them.
Violence against women is a crime, just like armed robbery or any other crime. So if you're a victim of a crime, the right place and the logical, the first step should be the police station, really. It should be the police station where you were an incident, that report, and then depending on your situation, either you are referred to the hospital for medical treatment and medical report, then the police commence investigation to it. If it's a woman who's been beaten and is scared of going back home, the police will say, okay, we know where we can take you to in terms of referral to a government agency or NGO that has a shelter and all that. But most of those things are not even available before you even go far to compensation. Compensation is that you are assuming the case has been investigated, you are assuming that the case has gone to court, and that while the perpetrator is being punished, there will be some compensation by way of whatever, to the victim. We don't have that.
Can you give us one or two concrete solutions that women can key into while they develop the strength or what have you to come out?
Well, one of the key issues is they must know themselves. A lot of women who are in domestic in violence relationships already saw the signs. You understand? And they hoped that marriage will change the potential husband or the husband. It never works that way. It gets worse. So one of the things we tell them when we are doing our awareness talks is for them to be aware of the signs. There are signs of a potential abuser or a potential violent person. There are signs. And you yourself, you must be confident in yourself. So it's a case of empowering them emotionally. And then they must know that there is help for them. You see, most times they don't know where to go to. It's amazing. Even intelligent, knowledgeable people, they don't know that Lagos State, because I can only talk about Lagos State, has instruments in place. There is the Office of the Public Defendant. If you cannot afford legal fees, you can go there. They're ready to assist you. The Ministry of Justice, they are ready to assist you. There is the Domestic Violence Unit that has been put in place. There is the Sexual Offenders Register. There is the Women's Ministry, WAPA. So they should know that there is a support, a very strong support system for them. They are not alone. And they are not victims. They are survivors.
We have the Lagos State Domestic Violence Law, which the beauty of it is that a woman who is experiencing violence can request or go to court and ask, or through her lawyers, ask for a protection order to try and protect herself, or a restraining order on the man, for example. And then it is that particular law is partly criminal, is partly civil, because in our criminal code already we have laws on assault occasioning harm, indecent assault and all that. And they are very criminal in nature, in the sense that if investigated and you found that you have a case to answer and it is charged to court, the perpetrator, even if he's a husband, can go in for 7 years or 10 years, depending on the gravity of the offense. So a lot of women shy away from those laws. Why? Because for a lot of women, what they want really is the violence to stop, not necessarily their marriages to end.
National Employers Consultative Association's network of entrepreneurial women presidents, Lola Okonlawo, joined other women to say that the fight against inequality at the workplace is yielding some positive fruits.
You're talking about domestic violence, but we have violence in the place of work.
Violence is never left at home too as well. It comes into the workplace and it affects the bottom line, it affects peak performance, because that woman who is sitting on that desk is not going to give her best. Maybe appraisal time is near and they now appraise her that she used to be good but she's dropped, she hasn't met her targets or whatever. Have you found out what really is going on there? Sexual harassment goes on full scale. As I said, it's not only with the men. Sometimes the women too harass the men if they are in higher positions of authority.
A lot of women have been sexually harassed out of their jobs, including married women. Rape, defilement, and even violence in the home impacts on the workplace, because a woman or even a man who has had problems with his wife that morning and maybe was in a fight or quarrel with his wife, to be honest, if he goes to the workplace that morning, will he be in a good frame of mind would he put in his best? You will not. So a woman who has experienced violence in the home and goes to work, definitely her productivity would be at its lowest.
You see, when you are at work and you are not happy doing your work, you are not going to give your best. And if this is stopped, women will be able to give their 100% to the businesses that they are doing.
Trade unions continue to put global pressure on Swaziland, where deepening human rights and workers' rights violations continue to take roots. Though trade unions are still being systematically undermined and a free press largely absent, Labour has chosen not to be silent.
In Swaziland, the monarch in power has continued to trample on human and trade union rights in the country unabated. While political parties were banned, the Labour Centre Trade Union Congress of Swaziland, TOCOSWA, was deregistered 3 years ago, with its leaders jailed. Journalists and political activists were also arrested and jailed. For 4 years, the Swaziland issue of violation of human and trade union rights by Swazi government had been on the agenda of the International Labour Conference. By May this year, Swazi government amended the Industrial Relations Act to allow for the registration of labour centres. The incarcerated Secretary General of TOCOSWA, Vincent Nkongware, says the union is agitating that the government be taken to the Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group.
The challenges that we have in Swaziland are that the government takes the strongest exception once workers also consider the political dimension that affects their lives. And as workers, we've got a problem with that. We've got a problem with that because, if I may start with the labor issues, we went to the ILO because of violations of work rights. Government had a problem with the existence of the big and only one at that time tribal labor center, that is the Trade Union Congress of Swaziland, TOCOSWA. What the government of Swaziland did was to go to court and say that the federation had been improperly registered, and that affected also even the employer federations. But with the pressure from the ILO, the government of Swaziland has had to amend the Industrial Relations Act to allow for the registration of the federations. That was done on the 12th of May, clearly because government was aware it was preparing for the ILO conference in June. In Geneva, the things that we laid out are things which the government had been unable to discuss with employer and worker federations in Swaziland. There were 5 benchmarks that Swaziland was supposed to have dealt with, which benchmarks were going to ensure that Swaziland does not lose eligibility to the African Growth Opportunity Act. And the loss of that resulted in Swaziland being put in the special paragraph in 2012. These are the things that we have also been agitating for Swaziland to be taken to the Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group, so that the Commonwealth gives a closer scrutiny to what's going on in Swaziland.
The TOCOSWA scribe says lack of engagement between workers, government and the trade unions has slowed down progress.
Swaziland is a Separation of Terrorism Act. It's not meant so much to deal with terrorism, but to stifle internal dissent, and that we could not accept. The same applies to the Public Order Act. It's got nothing so much to do with public order, but still to stifle political dissent. And that we can't have, because as unions, even though we deal with worker issues, we cannot divorce ourselves from the political dimension. These are the things that the government has to deal with. But the other problem that Swaziland has is that a current political system of not allowing political parties to represent their people in parliament is not only unique, so that's what they say, but we're also saying that it also flouts the basic democratic tenets that Swaziland is a signatory to, both of SADC, the AU, and the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. And these are things which we cannot accept because we appreciate as unions that there can be no meaningful enjoyment of worker rights in a country where you find that the politics are so stifled.
If the political space is not open, it will stifle trade unions. But what is the life of trade unions in Swaziland at the moment?
Trade unions are able to operate. The unions are able to represent their members, to engage on strike action if need be. That's not where the problem is. The problem is when you now deal with the national issues, which are issues that are to be dealt with by their federation, their national center. Because those issues have got a socio-economic and political dimension, and that is where government wants to frustrate.
The Nigerian Labour Congress says the deepening human and trade union rights violations in Swaziland is a battle they are winning. He says NLC would continue to give support to Swaziland and occupy its space in Africa.
Well, issue of human and trade union rights in Swaziland have been a challenge for some time. In fact, for you to belong to a trade union in Swaziland, it's a crime. And therefore, a lot of activists and workers have been incarcerated because of belonging to trade union, despite the fact that Swaziland is a signatory to the core ILO conventions of Convention 87 and 98 that allows for freedom of association and the right of workers to belong and form trade unions. Essentially, in the labor movement, we have seen injury to one as injury to all. And therefore, this issue of Swaziland has been a recurring issue at the last 4 conferences of the International Labour Conference in Geneva. And being people, NLC have participated on the Committee on Application of Standards. And in fact, myself have raised the issue around the issues of Swaziland. Resolutions have been taken at that tripartite level, but the implementation of such decisions have been a problem by the government of Swaziland. For free democratic process to take place and entrench in the Swaziland, the issue of multi-party democracy must actually also take its roots. It has not taken its roots, and that's why you have the issue of the sole monarch determining what happens. So we will continue to extend our support to our colleagues in Swaziland. We are happy that some of our colleagues that have been incarcerated have been released, but it's not yet a huru, because we must ensure that they have the right to belong to trade unions and also form trade unions of their right. They also have democratic rights to form political parties of their choice so that there will be issues of good governance. So we stand for that, and NLC will continue to give its support.
Secretary General, ITUC Africa, Kwesi Aduamankwa, says African trade unions appreciate the value of political pluralism and multi-party democracy.
The important thing to understand about the dynamics of international and regional work is that people really are supposed to do things to help themselves. What we do as an organization like ours is to offer support. To offer support that we can mobilize physically, financially, personnel, but also to mobilize solidarity.
That will be our package for today. Thanks so very much for being part of this show. Do join us next week for another informative and educating episode. Don't forget to use any of our social media platforms in case you have a comment or contributions. I am Mo Ogbone Wilkie. Bye-bye.